Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it might be where you are. Welcome. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Jeff Fritz, and we're going to write a little bit of code today. And I have a guest joining us. I am thrilled to be able to bring in and have joining us today. I'm wearing my geek hat. Check that out. Because we're going to geek out. We're going to talk a lot about community and interacting and building stuff that benefits the community with a friend that I've met, and we've been hanging out and corresponding for a while. This is Dave Glick. Hey, Dave.
Hello, how's everyone doing?
Thanks so much for joining us. There we go. We got a bunch of friends in the chat room already. So why don't you give folks a quick introduction of who you are, what you do, somewhere we might know you from.
Yep, okay. I am involved in the .NET open source community. That's kind of my primary hanging out spot where you might know me from. I do a lot of work with static website generation. I maintain the YM static site generator for .NET. I'm also on the Cake Build team, helping them with their documentation and build tooling experience, and other little bits and pieces here and there, open source projects, and Twitter, very active on Twitter.
Cool. So there's a bunch of stuff there that I want to unpack and get into, and YM is a tremendous framework. Look at that. Some of our friends in the chat room are already recognizing Go YM, says Willie. Yeah, Mordecai is chanting as well. Very cool. Thank you so much, chat room. Yeah.
Hey, I got a fan club.
There you go. Already. Look at that. So what's so interesting? What's so compelling about YM?
So I've been interested in static websites for a long time, and in fact, the term static website is even sort of antiquated. The idea that when you create a website, you have a web server that runs your code and renders the stuff that gets sent down to the browser, right? But we've got really, really fast machines now, right? And our browsers are really, really powerful.
Sure.
So, you know, the underlying question of where do you actually do that work? Do you do it on the server so one system has to do it for everyone? Or do you make the server as lightweight as possible and have it just deliver static resources that have been pre-built, pre-compiled, and then let the clients do all the work, and each client can do whatever work it needs to do? That's sort of the idea between static websites. It's not that the content is static, it's that the action happens on the client instead of the server. You shift who does the work.
I see.
So looking around the .NET space for something to do that kind of thing. You know, Jekyll was around 3 or 4 years ago. Hugo, another popular static site generator, was just getting started. But the .NET space didn't really have anything totally robust. So I built something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here, let's go over to the code, and we can actually, right, I think I'm here at YMIO. There it is. Oh, no, and of course, Skype is going to start resizing on me. Nice. Thanks, Skype. There it goes. All right, it fixed itself. So here I am at YMIO with all the details about a static content toolkit. So instead of having ASP.NET Core or ASP.NET or web forms or something that's building and handling every request that's coming in to assemble a header and a footer and put all the controls on the screen and all that stuff, layout and some of that stuff that we know is going to be the same for pretty much everybody. Render it as HTML, serve that quickly, and just have an API that's serving out just the data that changes. Do I have that right?
Exactly. Yep. And one of the interesting things, and this kind of segues nicely into the main topic of today, which is .NET Community and Discover.NET.
Oh, yeah.
Is that, I think people for a long time had this idea of static websites as being essentially static in the content sense, that you built it and you served up HTML and some images, and that's all there was to it, and then you're done. And I think that comes from the fact that a lot of early static generators were focused around blogging. But it's the
But I think that's actually a pretty good use case, right? I mean, once I write my blog post, it's done, it's static, save off that HTML, no need to use memory to cache it. Write the HTML to disk and serve that really fast. But there's other places, better places we can use this technology as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I'm not disparaging using static generators for blogging. In fact, it is a sweet spot for this kind of technology. But modern static sites and something that people have started to call the jam stack, stands for JavaScript APIs and markup. Giving it sort of that stack moniker, like LAMP or whatever. That modern static sites actually push a lot of that work onto the client so that they can be as dynamic as a server-backed website. And so that's something we're going to look at today, is a site built for the .NET community using YAML that acts like it's a database, but it's all static.
Very cool. Yeah, Landon BR in the chat room is chiming in about the Jamstack, JavaScript APIs and markup, saying that the JavaScript community really digs into that.
Oh yeah, and there's a that term was coined by some folks over at a company called Netlify.
Okay.
And their entire business model is essentially what would happen if you took what GitHub Pages is doing and then amped it up to 11. Yeah, so they're totally focused on static site hosting, and recently providing all of the additional sort of cloud-based services like form submission that you might want with a static website, so that you don't have to build that yourself on your server.
So you push it back through their API, and they manage doing all that CRUD interaction for you somewhere else. That's
exactly right. Yeah, and then they provide the data through APIs, so you can use Netlify as sort of a backend database, a lightweight database that's all driven through JavaScript and APIs. And then you wire that up to your static site through JavaScript, right? So that the stuff you're delivering to the client is HTML and JavaScript. So it doesn't change.
Okay.
The client then does all the work. It loads up that JavaScript that's being statically delivered from your server and executes it. And then now your client is essentially doing the work that a web server used to do.
Gotcha. And you would send down some sort of a key that has appropriate permissions so they can work with the APIs. And it's a public key, folks can see it, so that JavaScript can interact without running into any security concerns, I'm assuming.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah,
okay.
There's work in the security world around how do you properly authenticate stuff that's running entirely on the client, things like Java Web Tokens, and there's a few other options out there. Companies like Auth0 and Okta have kind of nailed down what that should look like. So there's open source implementations too, but by and large, that was a little weird for a while, but that's kind of a solved problem now too.
Yeah. Willie, 1977 Games in the chat room says, way back when I thought I had some time, I wanted to help Dave build SaaS into YM. But of course, as soon as I went, yup, I'll help out, family and real world came in. That's why today's chat was interesting to me. Hopefully we can get into how to juggle the community bits. I think we're going to see a little bit of that. Not sure if that's where we're headed, but that's fine if it's not all good. Yeah, we're absolutely going to get down into that area. Hugo asks, would it be how difficult would it be to store the content as Markdown and have that parsed and handled on the client?
That's a really interesting question. So most static generators read some sort of template, whether it's Markdown or Handlebars or Liquid, and they do that at generation time. And then the output of the generator is HTML, something that the browser can understand. What we've seen recently, though, is a rise of static generators that not only deliver static content to the client, but then the client actually interprets the templates. Vue and React are particularly active in this area.
Okay.
Tools like ViewPress is one that comes to mind. And in those cases, what gets delivered isn't the final HTML, it's the JavaScript for whatever JavaScript framework that generator uses, and then some resources, essentially the generator itself, and gets delivered to the client. And then the client renders all of that into what ends up in your DOM. So that is an area that the JavaScript community is experimenting with.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, I like the middle ground of generating before you serve, putting up the resources that have been generated as far as you can get them on a server, and then letting the client do stuff like read from the database or read APIs.
Yeah.
But that said, I'm a huge fan of Vue, and I'm interested to see where some of this sort of framework-oriented static generation ends up. I think it's pretty early for that kind of thing right now.
Sure. It sounds like a growing movement with folks experimenting and figuring out where to plug in these different pieces. Sanad Meskin in the chat asks, how does it impact SEO?
Well, so statically generated site that you generate beforehand and then upload the output, which is how YM and Jekyll and Hugo and most of the ones you might have heard of work. There's really no impact to SEO. You build in whatever meta tags you want into the layouts and the stuff that gets generated. And then those end up in your final output that gets loaded onto the web server or the CDN. So yeah, there really isn't a difference from an SEO perspective between server rendered websites and statically generated websites, as long as your layouts are using the proper meta tags and whatever other information you want.
Sure. I would actually think that search engines like Google that use response time as one of those factors to determine, page ranking, since the site's statically generated, it's actually going to rank higher because there is no wait time to render that HTML.
That's right. Yeah. Static websites have a few sort of advantages that get pushed around a lot. And one is performance.
Oh my gosh, yes.
You can stick them on a server, or even something people have been doing lately is just putting the entire static website directly on the edge through a CDN, through a content delivery network.
Yeah.
Because it is just normal, just HTML, JavaScript, and images. All the stuff that a CDN is designed to serve up.
Right.
So you don't need a server at all in that case.
Sure.
So
sure. Save it right out. Serve it right out of some cloud storage provider, whether it's Azure storage or I forget Amazon's AWS, right? The Amazon what do they call their storage? I forget what they call their.
Yeah, S3.
S3, yes.
Is that what you're thinking? Yeah.
So, real easy then to.
Oh, so really good point on the chat here. JavaScript is not executed when Google is indexing. That is a very good point. And the way that some of these JavaScript static generators work around that when you're sending the sort of pre-rendered version to the client is that they have a pre-rendered version on the server as well that doesn't have all the bells and whistles, specifically for search engine crawling and if you've got JavaScript turned off, that kind of thing. So yeah, they've thought of that, and it's still, like I said, they're still kind of working through what that looks like.
Very cool. Yeah. And I thought Google was starting to run some of the JavaScript when they crawl.
Yeah, they do some. I don't know that they'll run an entire Vue framework or React or something. I think they're just doing a little bit.
Cool. Okay, so I mean, the big site that you've built and you're running out there to help the .NET community, like we've been hinting at, is discover.net.
Yeah, so this is kind of the main reason we're here to talk today.
Oh yeah.
So this is built with YM. It's a static site, so something to just keep in the back of your mind as we're looking through here. Part of the reason I built it was to showcase. There's sort of three reasons I built it. One was to showcase YM. As kind of a, it can handle big, robust static sites. But almost more importantly than that, it was to showcase the Jamstack in general. The idea that with a well-built Jamstack site, you can have it act as if it were, run on a server.
Oh my gosh!
With
Yes.
all the bells and whistles and updates and interaction that you want. So on the technological side, that's one reason it was built. But the other reason is I really, really like the .NET open source community. And I was getting frustrated with the existing ways to discover new stuff. There's a lot of good, awesome lists out there. If you've never seen a awesome list, it's usually a curated list of resources, whether it's open source projects or streamers or websites or tools, or there's all kinds of these awesome lists. In fact, there's an awesome list of awesome lists.
Curated list of awesome lists.
Yeah. So they're really nice and they're active, but they can be hard to find things when they get big, particularly the awesome .NET list. They are just a list. So this kind of started out with me thinking, what would happen if you took one of these awesome lists and dumped it into a database? What would that look like? How would you filter it? How would you sort it? What would you use it for? So yeah, that was kind of where we started, and the project grew from there.
Okay. Our friend Gary in the chat room is saying the cakebuild.net website is also built with YM.
It is, absolutely, yep.
So yeah, look at that, generated by YM right there. Very cool. And I mean, when you think about those front door websites to promote whatever your product is, you aren't changing it that frequently. You don't need to be rendering it every time. So why not statically generate it and put in just the JavaScript bits that you need?
Well, I'm actually glad you said that, because one of the techniques that's emerged recently for making static websites more powerful is frequent regeneration. We have all of these CI/CD servers out there in the cloud now, right? We've got Azure Pipelines, GitHub Actions, Netlify has its own build server. So you've got a million different ways to run code in the cloud. And most of these now are free or cheap to execute. So if your build cycles are essentially free, and generating your static website requires a build, why not just run that frequently? Run it every hour, run it every 10 minutes.
Sure.
In fact, if you want to take that to an extreme, let me give you a website to go to. It is, I'm looking up the site right now. So go to all one word, setyourwatchby.netlify.com.
Netlify.com.
So this is a clock, right? It's on, I think it's on UTC right now.
No, that's not UTC. That's Pacific.
Or LA. Yeah, LA. You can give it a different time zone in the URL. I forget what the convention is. But this is a static website, and it rebuilds itself every single minute.
No.
Yes.
What's the source code look like to this thing?
It's very, very simple.
Time, and it's literally the time. There's no JavaScript here.
Well, yeah, exactly.
But it's got a meta refresh.
Yep. It is regenerated using Netlify's CI/CD pipeline and a timer, a cron job basically, every minute, and pushed up to Netlify servers, redeployed to Netlify's CDN, and then meta refreshed in your browser every single minute.
Holy crow.
So, this is just a fun little experiment the Netlify folks did to see how far you can take this regeneration concept.
I like Willie's suggestion in the chat room. It'd be nice if it took a guess based on your browser location, because...
yeah.
Right, and if it doesn't match the current time zone, redirect, but then you'd have to write some JavaScript. So, oh, Willie says it does that. It does?
Oh,
It does? Because it's routed me to Pacific time. Oh, you got 327 there. Okay. Detected.
interesting.
Interesting.
So maybe it's based on some sort of header from the browser or something.
Yeah. So, interesting.
Oh, or you know what it might be? It could be maybe which CDN you're hitting, which edge node.
Yeah. Wonder why I'd be getting. Well, whatever.
Yeah. So in any case, the idea that you can rebuild a static site on a regular basis to update the data on that static site and deliver it to clients is kind of a new one, but it turns out that there's a whole lot you can do with that. So getting back to discover.net,
right?
It includes a lot of sort of current data, right? It has a blog roll of recent blog posts that needs to be updated. It tracks issues in all of the projects that need to be updated periodically. So discover.net is rebuilt through Azure pipelines every hour. The entire site is regenerated. We go out and hit GitHub, refresh the issues, hit all of the blogs we know about, get the RSS feeds and aggregate them. The entire site, including all the APIs we hit, is performed every hour.
And how long does it take to do that re-indexing and deploy of the HTML?
So it's getting up there. Particularly, so it takes about 30 to 35 minutes right now to build the entire site. Most of that is because of the rate limiting in GitHub.
Oh, okay.
GitHub has very, very strict rate limiting requirements.
They do.
If you hit their API concurrently with more than a single session, you end up getting flagged as a malicious bot and they cut you off. So built into discover.net is some code that hits the GitHub API for each of the projects in here one at a time. And so, that's a lot of back and forth and takes some time to get through.
Running that in serial has got to take a little bit longer than if you could run them in parallel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Wow. And so how do you? Well, okay. So you've built this, and you're crawling a bunch of different projects. So these are open source projects over here on the right. Help wanted. These are help wanted issues, I'm guessing. Yep. Over here.
Yes, it's a random selection of relatively recent help wanted issues across every project that discover.net knows about. I think we're up to like 650 or some.
Wow. Okay.
So each rebuild, it'll go out and get all of the help wanted issues from all of those 650 projects, and then sort of stick them together and then put them in a single JSON file that discover.net can read. So there's a little shuffle button.
Yeah.
Underneath help wanted. Yeah. If you click that, you can see it kind of cycle through.
Oh wow!
Give you some new ones.
And it's just randomly pulling from that JSON file.
That's correct. Yeah.
Man. Okay. I love the idea with technology of being able to boil things down to, let's stop over engineering things. Let's make it simple. We know how to do these simpler things and do all the complex things so in the framework or whatever, so that when it's time for us to actually use the technology, it's simple. And I love that kind of interaction. It's just refreshing from a JSON file instead of hitting an API that queries a database and select top where random. No.
Well, that's right. When you think about it, what is a REST API if it's returning the same result for the same request? It's just a JSON file.
Yeah.
So you can have, and we'll get to this in a little bit, discover.net has an API, but that quote unquote API is a series of JSON files that get rebuilt with the site. Because, again, it's static. And what is a static REST API? It's just JSON stuff.
Yeah. So, okay. We've got this list of projects here. What if we wanted to add a new project to it, right? What if?
Yeah. So let's look at the projects list.
Okay.
So if you
So I'll click into
click on
projects.
projects up at the top, yeah.
So these are all those open source projects that you're indexing. And it's certainly not exhaustive. It's not all of the open source projects that are out there.
Correct. Yeah. Just like the awesome lists, this is curated.
Okay.
Which means that anyone can submit new projects, but they do get vetted a little bit, because the problem with trying to pull in all .NET projects from everywhere is you get a lot of noise, right? There's a lot of stale projects. There's a lot of things that aren't really projects, right? If you ever just do a random search on NuGet, on the NuGet gallery for some word, I don't know, and you look at the results, there's a good chance that a third to a half of those are going to be junk stuff, right? It's going to be things that someone made for internal. Try searching for.
I searched for lawn chair.
Lawn chair.
It's like a couch except smaller and outside. Perfect for HTML5 mobile apps that need a lightweight, adaptive, and simple, elegant, persistent solution. Last updated 2014.
Oh, 2014. Yeah. So maybe this is one that shouldn't be listed, or maybe it should be listed, but we annotate it somehow as a retired project or a stale project.
Yeah, right? Well, so we were talking to our friend Elizabeth Schneider, Moz, in the chat room the other day, and we looked at the Zendesk API, right? Zendesk API, right? What was the... That wasn't her. What was the name of her project?
It is, I had it up here. It's Zendesk API v2. And you can tell because it has a whole bunch of downloads.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
Just updated 2 weeks ago. So they're actively out there doing stuff. Yeah, whole bunch of downloads. Where's that total? You know, approaching 400,000. Fantastic. What if we wanted to list this project on Discover?
Yeah, let's go ahead and add this to discover.net because it's not there. And it, I saw your stream, thought it was cool, really liked that project. So why don't we go ahead and add it?
Okay.
On the projects page, there's a little link that says suggest new that you can click, or down at the very bottom of every discover.net page, there's a link for suggest content.
Suggest content. Okay.
Yep. And so if you click that and go to the suggestion page, it's a web form that you can fill out. So kind of the minimum we need for a project here, we want to put in the source repo because that's where we get the issues. That's where we get the, all that good metadata comes from GitHub for the most part. So we want to put that in, certainly.
Yes.
So get the URL to her GitHub page.
So I'm going to copy it from right there.
Yep, so stick it on in there.
And then the NuGet location. The name, not the full URL of all NuGet packages in the project. Okay. Well, it's this, Zendesk API v2. I'll copy that.
Exactly.
Language. Oh, okay. So the language, C#, F#, VB. I thought it was C#.
I think it's C#. Yep. Yeah, it is. The green bar is C#.
When I click, there we go. C#, 99%. Holy crow. All right. So C#, image, a URL to an image or logo for the project. I don't think there was one. Let me go back. Well, there's this.
Yep. So if you just copy that image location and paste it on there.
All right. Title of the project. If a GitHub repository is provided for the source, the title from the repository will be used. Fine, we'll use that. Short description.
You can essentially leave off everything else. It'll get the rest from GitHub if it exists, except for at the very bottom, there's a field for tags.
Okay.
And so this is the one thing I end up fine tuning when we get submissions because I don't want this to explode with a million different tags. Part of the value in having this project database is that it's easy to find groupings of projects.
Yeah.
So I'll just tell you that the appropriate tag for something like this, there's a tag called API client.
API client, so one word like that?
2 words. Yeah, go ahead and put it in as 2 words.
Okay.
Yep, and then go ahead and hit the create pull request.
So, Lannon's asking, this generates a PR?
It does, yes. In fact, this is one of my favorite aspects of this submission process. So yeah, go ahead and fork it and propose changes. It'll fork discover.net and create the PR for you with everything formatted nicely as YAML.
Very cool.
So that's all driven.
Late
if
to the
anyone wants to
party.
do this,
Fifth month in
you
row,
can dig
though.
into the code in discover.net. It's all driven by JavaScript. Essentially, when you hit submit on the form, some JavaScript goes through, takes those fields, constructs the YAML content of this new file for the PR. And
Okay.
then there's a special kind of GitHub URL you can use that will pre-fill
The content.
fields in a GitHub PR. Yeah.
Nice.
So the last thing you need to do is name your files. So let's call this Zendesk API.yml.
.yml. All right.
Yep.
And yeah, create. That's fine. That's a fine.
Yep. You can just leave it. Yep.
Propose. All right.
Okay. So the PR is in, and I will go and let's accept this in real time.
Well, hang on. It says comparing changes. It hasn't actually created the pull request.
Yep.
It committed the file.
Oh yes. Yep. So commit it to your
Adding
local
another
form
month
to actually create the PR.
All right. I need to figure out how to quiet down that that alert box. Holy crow.
Okay. So I see your PR.
Fantastic.
Take a look. I'm gonna look at this and review the changes. Okay. So I do see one problem.
Uh-oh.
The tags is case sensitive. So I'm just going to come in here and correct that for you during my review process.
Okay.
And language is case sensitive too. So I'm going to fix that for you too. And yeah, and I don't mind doing this. Don't be afraid to submit new stuff to discover.net. I'll make sure it's all fixed up before it gets merged.
Okay.
So I'm going to go ahead and fix that up for you. And okay, looking good. And let's go ahead and get this guy merged.
Fantastic. While you're
there
doing
we go. So
merged commit,
yep.
All right, and it'll build now, or we'll get that in the next build.
Yeah, we'll get it on the next build. It'll come up somewhere in the hour or so time frame.
Gotcha. Okay. I want to just. Why did it do that? Thank you so much for the follows. Who was it? I am Omnivore, and new subscriptions from DevLead and Stelzy. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your support. I clicked through. I'm trying to mute Steve here. He's been a little loud for us. There we go. So let's see. Landon says, that's cool. You don't need to know the YAML format. You just fill out the form. Does it for you. That is really cool. You could do them as suggestions as part of the review rather than you doing it. I'm not sure what's being said there. I'm not following. I'm sorry.
Do you mean, Gary, do you mean instead of me committing the changes directly to do a review process and suggest to the original submitter that they change it? Yeah. Well,
okay.
Actually, what I really would like to do, one of my goals for this year is to automate this whole process and get a PR bot in here that will evaluate the PRs for correctness.
That makes sense.
And then automatically merge them if everything looks correct.
Sure. And there's lots of bots out there, and there's great documentation around that. Listening for a webhook when there's a pull request we created, and then interacting with it.
Yep. All right. So we've got looks like we've got a question about Algolia, which is great. Can we take a moment to answer that? Because I love Algolia.
Absolutely. So I'm going to go back to the Discover website while you're doing that.
Yep. So going back, and now in the search box, go ahead and just type web.
Holy crow, that was fast.
Yep. So the search box here is using a service called Algolia, and one of the we touched on this earlier. One of the tenets of the Jamstack and building static sites this way is that you use a lot of cloud services where you can to provide functionality. And so a company called Algolia, which all they do is essentially search providing,
Okay.
is handling the search results here. So to answer your first question, how difficult was that to get set up? Not very. The way it works is when YM rebuilds the website every hour, part of that job, and actually this part is not in YM but in Cake. One of the things Cake does during the rebuilding process, once YM is done building the site, YM spits out JSON files for the API, for a variety of reasons, for itself. So then Cake, the Cake build script after the generation, will go and read those JSON files and communicate with the Algolia API to upload and update the Algolia search index from the data that YM spit out when it was generating the site. So Algolia gets updated every hour along with the site. And the rest is kind of just JavaScript display. Each one of these sections is a different index in Algolia. So when you have a Algolia account, you set up one or more search indexes, and those are kind of distinct quote unquote databases of stuff you want to search.
Okay.
So each of the main sections here in Discover.net ends up as a different search index, which is why we're able to pull out results from projects, from blogs, from posts, do all that independently. But the end result is this nice search box here that when you're looking for anything, you can see any projects related to it, any issues, all kinds of good stuff. Blog posts that people have done on that particular topic.
Oh yeah. Very cool. Now, and I like the comment from Gary and from Hugo. When we were doing this suggest, you know what your existing tags are. You could render those as JSON and then do an autocomplete or a limit to a list as those were being keyed in.
That's a cool. So if you wanted to use the search box to narrow in on a particular tag.
Well, not just on the search box, but when you're submitting a project.
Oh, for the project submission. Oh, even better. Yeah, I love that idea.
Do a little validation. That's a great idea.
Yeah. Hey, Gary. You know where the new issue button is, right?
Let's see. R.H. Sumner says, silly question, but why put PR evaluation on the server side with a bot? Just enforce and fix correctness with client-side validation. Yeah, that goes right towards what we're...
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I think if we doing that is probably great because it'll give faster feedback before the PR process is done. I think we'd still need to do it on the server side, though, too, because the site accepts PRs not through the web client, right? It's a GitHub project, and PRs are welcome and accepted just from normal forking it and adding in a YAML file, which we do get.
Sure. So just like with any other application, if you're going to do client-side validation, you also need to do server-side in case somebody circumvents the client.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Willie asks, are you thinking of going the GitHub action route for automating that suggest content process?
I am. I'm also thinking about GitHub Actions for the whole PR validation process.
Yeah.
The site itself is built on Azure pipelines, and I don't think that'll change just because the build process is so resource intensive. And I don't know that I'd want to offload all of that into GitHub Actions. But doing something like PR validation seems like a really ideal use case for the action stuff.
Very cool. And Hugo's commenting about a way to suggest a new tag or language if it doesn't exist.
Yeah, so there's no master list. The set of tags is just an aggregate of all of the ones people have added to YAML. So the way to suggest new ones is just to add it to the PR. And I generally try and stick to the established ones, but I've left ones in there if it's something that's not already covered, if it seems broad enough.
Cool. Very cool. All right. So now, I mean, we've seen some really cool stuff happen here in the community. Thank you, El Chef, for subscribing with Twitch Prime, and somebody else, Willie, thank you so much for subscribing with Twitch Prime. I love seeing all the stuff here, and we've talked a little bit about the .NET community. We both saw this great post yesterday. I want to make sure I call it out from Scott Hunter, who's the director of .NET for Microsoft. He wrote a post on Medium. That's kind of weird. Microsoft folks writing on Medium. Fine. But talking about starting the .NET open source revolution at Microsoft. If you're interested in figuring out how your organization should get started with open source, or why did Microsoft jump into open source, you got to check out this blog post. It talks about how and why Scott joined Microsoft, and then how things started happening to get .NET to start the .NET framework, and certainly .NET Core, to get it doing open source. Really, really interesting post here. I'm going to copy and paste this into the chat room. Check it out if you're interested in the history of why these things happen, how they happen, or even some of the politicking at Microsoft. Really good post about how we got to where we are with Microsoft and .NET being open source. GitHub Actions are really going to change how we use GitHub as a whole. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Being able to do more continuous integration types of interactions directly from GitHub. Huge, huge benefits for all of us. So, all right. Now, not just Microsoft doing open source, but there's a number of things that have been going on in the .NET community and some of these projects that we see here that have been a little bit interesting recently. And we talked briefly about one or two of these and around how to support some of these folks. I see you have things here like donations accepted. What the heck was that?
That was me dropping off for a sec.
Oh, wow. Okay. I've never heard.
I'm back, though.
There we go. We're back. Skype reconnecting. That's what it was. And GitHub now gives unlimited number of private repos. Yes. Yes. So literally, there's no reason why you can't do some of these things. But if there are open source projects that you use a lot, and if your organization is dependent on, why not support them by throwing a couple of bucks their way? I know you have down here at the bottom, buy me a coffee. I love that. You know, drop me $5, buy me a cup of coffee to say thank you, to help encourage these folks to continue building their applications. And there's this real challenge. We saw this in, I forget which community it was. Was it the JavaScript community, where there was a maintainer that was burned out? And somebody said, oh, yeah, I'll maintain the project for you. And they were a bad actor and swapped out some of their code.
Yeah, that sort of triggered a lot of discussion and thought leadering and thinking about, what can we do here? And, this comes up every few months. Some maintainer gets burned out, the project gets abandoned, and everyone sort of kind of goes back to the drawing board and thinks about how can we make open source more sustainable. That was kind of one of the goals I had for Discover.net, actually, was to help people call out projects that were accepting donations and that wanted help, both in terms of monetary support through these donation accepted banners, and also through exposing help wanted issues a little more cleanly.
Oh, yeah.
Because as a maintainer, help comes in all kinds of forms. It can be monetary support. It can be someone helping review PRs. It can be help on the docs. All kinds of ways that people can help out. But particularly in the monetary world, we're seeing some interesting stuff going on within the last few months. I know we want to talk about what's going on with Fody and Simon Krupp and his new scheme. So while you're bringing that up, I'll also talk about there's a company called Tidelift that's actually doing something interesting too. This is kind of a new idea that I've seen floating around, where they're attempting to get subscribers to essentially you subscribe to open source. So if you have a company and your company is using open source, you go and contact Tidelift and say, I'm using open source and I'm going to pay $1,000 a month and I want some guarantees for the open source I use.
Yes.
So then Tidelift takes that, scans your projects for the open source dependencies that you're using,
Okay.
and allocates the money that you're paying them to those projects based on certain criteria. How popular they are, how much they're being used by your project. They've got some special sauce that allocates the funds that you're paying in one payment out to the individual projects. And so the idea is, if someone like them can get a critical mass and get enough money coming in, and also enough participants on the project side, that they can kind of solve this, how do you get money from the users to the maintainers in a fair and equitable way that covers lots of projects.
What's their website?
So that's Tidelift. Started by a bunch of folks who are pretty big in the open source community.
Tidelift.com.
Yep. And they support JavaScript, and I think they do Ruby gems right now.
Okay.
I've had a couple of discussions with them, as I know some other folks have, about setting up some .NET support as well, being able to read through your NuGet dependencies and key off of that. So that's an interesting approach.
So this would be, instead of supporting and going through someone like the Open Source Foundation, the JavaScript Foundation, the .NET Foundation, who are providing legal guidance and other support to some of these organizations, Tidelift is just acting as a central clearinghouse. Give them money and they will redistribute appropriately to your source code, your open source projects that are accepting donations.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay,
and they provide some limited guarantees for the projects that are part of Tidelift. If Tidelift accepts your project as a recipient of those funds, and you're in the quote unquote subscription, to do that, you essentially assert that you're going to fix security bugs. You'll be reasonably responsive to PRs and issues and that kind of thing.
So they won't just accept my lawnchair.net project that hasn't been touched in 5 years.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of give and take there.
Sure.
Which is in contrast to something like the Buy Me a Coffee button that I'm fond of using, which basically has no give and take. There's no implied, stuff for that at all. It's basically just, here's $5, enjoy it. Go have some dinner.
Right. This is the projects that are approved and are going here. They're actually committing to doing some maintenance, providing appropriate licensing, addressing security appropriately and timely when they're being supported.
Yeah, and there's like the open collective model, which is you pay that project, but the payment to the project goes in a holding account that gets distributed for specific project-oriented activities.
That's not the right one.
So when you give funds to an open collective, you're sort of saying, okay, I want to support this project, and I want my money to be used on the project.
Yeah, look at that. Samsung donated $70,000. Holy crow!
Yeah, Patreon or Open Collective has become very popular with some of the very big JavaScript projects.
Mm-hmm.
Patreon's another one that is sort of a similar model, except instead of sponsoring the project and having that be sort of geared towards specific project goals, you're sort of sponsoring the maintainer.
Right. So these other two really aren't specific, saying I want to buy something here. It's, here's some money for this project, use it as you see fit, and I'm supporting you. And Patreon, right, it's a monthly subscription that folks typically set up. You pay a certain amount each month and you get something back, presumably. And that's where I think Fody gets interesting.
Yes, yeah. So let's talk about Fody now that you've got.
Yeah. Now that we got to Patreon, right? We went from Tidelift, Open Collective. Now we got to Patreon. Fody This is interesting. When you read through his README when you read through the Fody README, the lead maintainer here, Fody requires a significant effort to maintain. As such, it relies on financial contributions to ensure its long-term viability. It is expected that all developers using Fody become a patron on Open Collective. Whoa. That's interesting.
Yeah, so it's pay to play. There's no legal requirement. It's
No.
not like there's a license that enforces this, but there is an expectation that you submit some funds,
Right.
which is an interesting model. So that leads to the question of how do you enforce that? I'm going to expect it, and lots of people are going to do that on their honor.
Yes.
But some people won't. So what sort of, there's the carrot and the stick, right? So...
And actually, Brave Cobra asks a good point. Isn't Patreon only for the U.S.? Is it available in Europe?
I actually think he worded that README pretty poorly.
Okay.
The Fody is an open collective. It's not a Patreon. He used the word Patreon with capital letters, I think, to mean the sort of general language version of that.
Okay. So, expect you to become a patron on Open Collective, not necessarily on Patreon. So, using Open Collective. Okay.
Yeah.
And you can use it. You're allowed to use it. The licensing, this is an open source project. But if you want support, he's expecting you to be a patron. Interesting.
Yeah, so the carrot here is be nice and support open source, I think.
Yeah.
The stick is, and I think he's still kind of working through what this looks like, but the stick is if you want to submit an issue or even submit a PR and have that reviewed and accepted, you're expected to have an Open Collective account and have donated, and he will.
Ooh. Skype's taking
so
the power
it's an interesting
there
model.
Yes.
Yeah, it'll. I think it remains to be seen how successful this is and how popular it is. It got a lot of feedback in both directions. There were a lot of folks who thought, this may be a good way to sort of kick open source sustainment into high gear. It's easy. It doesn't require too much effort on the part of users. But then there was a lot of other feedback that was like, if every project I use goes this way, that's 300 projects now I got to keep track of open collectives and donations. What about, there's questions about upstream and downstream use, right? What if you're a project that uses Fody? Do you, as a maintainer, owe them something? Do your users owe them something?
Right.
I think he's still working out, and I think the community is working out what this model might look like. But more than anything, I'm happy to see people still innovating in the sustaining area.
And the great point that's being raised here is open source isn't free of cost. Someone has to pay the cost for this, whether it's time, talents, the various expenses behind it. It's not free to have the resources to build and maintain all of these things. Okay, GitHub is now free for personal use. It's always free for open source. Azure pipelines, it's free for open source. But somewhere along the line, somebody's got to buy a domain name. Somebody's got to pay for artists to create logos. There's cash that changes hands here at some point. I agree with Welsh Ronaldo. It seems fair that when your open source folks can request payment for some of these things. Yes. You can have commercial products that are also open source. I've always liked the idea of if there's a feature that I need for my organization and I don't have the resources to build the pull request to to make that happen. I like the idea of being able to buy a pull request, be able to buy a feature, right? And be able to say, hey, Fody, I'd really like feature X, and I'll pay you the $5,000, whatever it is, to develop that feature, and then it benefits my organization, you get it open source, and I've helped support the open source project. Stelzy says open source is not free as in free beer. Many people who use it don't understand the difference. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I agree. ShiftKey has a good link there. Open source maintainers do not owe you anything. Don't go to open source folks. And our friend Snipey Head on Twitter, I need to have Allison on at some point, talks about she maintains an open source project, and you'll see her tweet when people come and complain to her about, oh, you need to build this feature. Why isn't this bug fixed? It's open source. You're going to get what you've got. It's free. You want to pay for support? You want to pay for that? Pay for it, and then we'll talk. And then people complain. But they do owe you nothing. This is a great little essay here about it. Everything is provided as is. It says it right at the top of the licenses, right, Dave? So, yeah. Let's not get crazy about pushing back on open source maintainers. So, okay. I think this is a very interesting thing out here. Yes, or fix it. That's always a great thing. Submit a pull request. Always. And ShiftKey says, I have feels on this. You have feels on this. Not me. You have feels. I get it. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Blogged your OSS frustration a few years ago. I'll grab that one from our friend Dev Lead there in the chat room. There we go, Matthias.
Yeah, I think every open source maintainer who's been doing it for any length of time on projects that end up getting community involvement ends up with some pretty strong feels one way or the other on this issue.
Yes.
It's because you're giving so much of yourself, right? The time that a maintainer spends on their projects is time that could have been spent doing other things. That's riding the bike with the kids one afternoon that you didn't do.
Yes.
That's a book that you didn't read or a game you didn't play.
Mm-hmm.
And we all have different reasons for undertaking this exercise, right? I like to think of open source maintainers as doing it for some sort of currency. There is an economy there, but it's not necessarily monetary, right? People do open source for all kinds of reasons.
They do.
And oftentimes it has nothing to do with actual money, right? It may be credibility, it may be altruism, it may be a need that they had. There's all these different reasons that people get involved in open source.
Oh yeah.
But at the end of the day, what they spend on that in time, there's an expected payoff in something. And I think that's where people end up with the feels is, how do you ensure that the something that you're expecting to receive from that time that you've given up actually appears? And
when you get in and you start these projects, you don't expect to have millions of users and millions of projects using it. Speaking about towards Cake, like Matthias has blogged about here, Cake's got a huge user base. Huge. So as you're building what was just a pet project, an open source project that scratched that itch for you, solved that initial problem, well, you get a year or two in, and now, well, when I build this feature, is it going to break my users? And if it does, I'm going to get heat from them because it doesn't behave the same way, right? Now you've got that stress. What do I do? And that's something that we've certainly felt at Microsoft on my teams, where we're building a feature. Do we change how this behaves, or do we fork it and name it something else that behaves similarly so that we don't break anybody? When you've got 5 million users using it, what do? The stress level goes up. So, okay, Microsoft is a paid organization that's driving these things, so they're going to solve that problem. But for the average person who's working in their garage or in their basement, that's not a stress point that you want, is it?
Right. How do you, the thing that I've been trying to think about for a while now around open source is not so much how do you get money to maintainers, because again, that's not what every open source maintainer is looking for. It's always nice, right? I love it when someone clicks the buy me a coffee button and I get $5 and I can go have a coffee or
Absolutely.
a snack or something. That's always a nice thank you, but that's not really the reason I'm in it. And I know that's not the reason a lot of people are in it. So the real question is not how do you get money to maintainers, but how do you both discover and get to the maintainers the kind of currency that they want to get back for their work, right? How do you ensure that the maintainers who have given time for things that you're using receive back that which they wanted to get back from doing that?
Yeah.
That's where I think we as users should be trying to help. And sometimes that is monetary, right? Sometimes, open source maintainers would like monetary donations, and particularly if they've got a bigger project and that money can be funneled back into the project, thus freeing up their time. But sometimes it's just things like notoriety, right? And so how do you help that maintainer get the thing that they would like back for that effort? And some of that's just spreading the word, right? It's retweeting things. It's getting the word out about their projects. It's maybe submitting PRs. And so that is a little bit where my work on Discover.net comes back around full circle, because for a lot of these projects, I think a lot of maintainers partly do it to get noticed, right? They want to have a voice. They're shouting into the void that they want someone to notice.
Yes.
And so how can we help with that? And one of the bigger ways of helping with that is by exposing those lesser known projects to the world and saying, hey, here's something really cool that you might have been looking for and you didn't know how to find. Here it is.
And right, that's one of the features of Discover.net. And giving people that recognition, I try to do that here on the stream. If folks have contributed to our projects, I have the ticker up at the top that has, here's the contributions to our projects on stream go by. And I think there's simple things like that for folks to show them a little thank you. In the past, for the .NET community, the .NET Foundation has issued to everybody who's submitted pull requests a challenge coin. Right? If you submitted a pull request that benefited the .NET community in one of Microsoft's .NET open source projects, they issued a challenge coin to everybody in the community that submitted something. Huge amount of recognition from Microsoft to send out, and they also sent out a little gift basket with a bunch of things with it. But those challenge coins, people were like, "This is pretty cool."
Yeah, so swag is fun. As a maintainer, it doesn't cost users or companies a lot to do, but it's fun to get. I've got I've got a really fun. Can you see that?
Oh yeah.
That's so last winter or last fall, GitHub, they couldn't send it to everyone because there's way too many people to produce these for everyone. But they randomly selected a pretty large number of maintainers on the platform, and just randomly sent them some stuff. You got those cups. They sent out some cool coasters.
Yeah.
That totally made like my entire month in the open source world. And just for one set of that probably didn't cost them very much at all, especially since they were ordering in bulk. But just the idea of being noticed, and being appreciated.
Yeah, that little bit of thanks. Even sending out like sticker packs, right?
Yeah, totally.
The cost of a stamp and however much to buy a block of stickers it's a simple gesture, but it's such a nice thank you to folks.
Yeah. Yeah, and so to extend that idea down into what us as users can do, because we're not, you're not going to go around and get pint glasses and coasters for everyone,
No.
but just the idea of being thanked, right? Being polite in your interactions with maintainers and thanking them for the work they do goes a heck of a long way.
Oh my gosh, yes. Oh yes. I I don't see any of my stickers here. They must be in my bag. And our friend there, Brendan has another link for us. Required reading from the Ford Foundation. Let's take a look at this. Roads and Bridges: The Unseen Labor Behind Our Digital Infrastructure. I haven't read this one. Is this about open source?
Was this Nadia Egball's paper? Is this the one she had worked on? Does it say who wrote this?
It does not. Nadia Egbal. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So she has done a lot of work around open source, kind of from an economist perspective. She was given this pretty large grant by the Ford Foundation to look into all this, and so someone who's definitely worth following and reading what she produced as part of that. There's also a really good podcast that's been retired now. But if you're interested in open source and open source sustainment, look up the podcast Request for Commits, hosted by her and another guy. Really good and has a lot of excellent insight into the open source world and community.
There you go. Request for Commits. Retired. Explored different perspectives in open source sustainability with Nadia and is that Michael Rogers.
Yeah, definitely worth. If you're interested in this whole world of open source sustainment and things, this is definitely a podcast to sort of queue up and listen through the previous episodes.
I will put that link in the chat room. Let's see. And Willie says, let's see, twitching. I've given up, took the foot off the gas. Oh, wait, did you used to have a Twitch stream? It's not just the streaming, it's all the other work. It's exactly the same as open source. Yes. So there's so much going on around just, right? This is open source content. This is me sharing stuff free for anybody, right? Here on Twitch. Archive over on YouTube, and if you're watching on YouTube, join us on Twitch. It's a lot more fun over here. You get to ask questions, and there is a lot that you put in to make some of these things happen. And when you get those little bits of thank you, whether it's a cheer or a sub, or right, just a nice comment saying thank you, it lifts you up. It's the same with open source. So. Draga asks, am I doing anything with Stream Deck today? We're going to get back to the Stream Deck project tomorrow. Thursdays are when I have guests on, and today our guest is Dave Glick. Hey, there's our friend James Montemagno. Just gifted a sub. Thanks so much, James. And Murky God tier, you're going to get to use the .NET bot everywhere on Twitch. Thank you for the kind cheer, Crazy. Very cool. And I'll make a matching donation to Black Girls Code this month. There's James. Hello, hello. So we've talked about recognizing folks, and we've got some really neat projects and things that are going here on Discover.net. And my ticker up at the top is it's a little bit boring. There's a couple projects there that I'm not currently working on that I could move out of there. But what might be fun to do, I know you have an API here. It might be cool to grab like the top 5 latest headlines and add them in. Oh my gosh, Mike Jolly, pardon me, Dave, but Mike Jolly, yeah, just donated 10 gift subs to folks in the community. Thank you so much, Mike. We'll match and make donations to Black Girls Code. But Shift Key, you get a sub. Voltage, is that Trife? Oh wow, Trife Life. Developers Garage, Brian W. Smith, Enrix, Franklin89, Javos, and Andre. Thank you so much. Yes, let's drop some hype for Mike Jolly here. Thank you so much for those gift subscriptions. And like I said, we'll match and make donations to Black Girls Code for every bit, for every and for every sub. Very cool. Thank you so much. Yeah, crushing it, says James. Absolutely. This is about community. We want to make sure that folks grow, and that's why I like supporting folks like we did Girl Develop It all last year, Black Girls Code this year. This quarter we're going to do a different charity each quarter this year. So thank you so much. And all those folks, you're going to get to use the .NET bot, just like Franklin is there. Go ahead and abuse that everywhere on Twitch. Let them know you came from here. Awesome stuff. Thank you so much. And actually, James is going to be setting up for, what is it, the mobile .NET community stand-up here at the top of the hour. And we're going to raid over to there when we're done here. So you can have lots of .NET content throughout the day. So getting back into what we were talking about, we have you have an API for this, and I saw there's an API button down here at the bottom, and if I click through to that, right? So you have a bunch of different endpoints here. Are these free, and I can just hit these with my with whatever HTTP client that I have?
Totally, yeah. So again, one of the benefits of a static site is that the JSON that we're serving as API endpoints is, it's also static and can be deployed to CDNs, to your stack web host. So you don't have to worry about things like rate limiting or overloading the server or anything like that. In fact, this is a pretty decent way, to the extent that the projects that are already listed on discover.net have information that you would normally be getting from GitHub. Coming over here and grabbing that data from here is a nice way to avoid angering the rate limit gods.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because we're basically re-hosting a lot of the data we're pulling each hour from GitHub.
Okay. So you're effectively mirroring it.
Yeah, for the projects that we know about.
Sure.
And in very specific ways. But there's also aggregate feeds for things like the blog roll, for groups and events. So essentially anything that's exposed on the site is also available through a JSON endpoint.
Awesome. Very cool. So what do you say we take a little bit of time here? We've got about 45 minutes till we need to wrap up. What do you say we update my little crawl up there and put like a top 5 news items from discover.net right there in the crawl?
Let's do it. Let's write some code.
Cool. Sanad, thanks so much for joining us. And of course, if you need to take off, there's a link. You'll see the YouTube channel is going to pop up here in my nameplate. This will be archived and available on YouTube a little bit later today. All right. EJ, thanks so much for subscribing with a Twitch Prime account. All right, let's open. I was playing with a project over here, but let's go into our Stream Tools project. Stream Tools. And I'm going to set up and use Visual Studio Live Share here with Dave so that we can get in and start querying and using that API. Oh, Mike Jolly asks, Dave, can you help out with this? How can I find projects on discover.net that need help?
Yep. One of the things discover.net does is gathers up all of the issues from all of the projects we know about, and then scans those issues for a variety of different help wanted tags. I think we've covered most of them, but if we're missing one, let me know.
Okay.
So we can get a list of essentially every help wanted issue in every project. And so then if you go over to the issues screen and hit the help wanted tab,
there we go.
You can see help wanted issues across all projects, sorted by time. But you can also, in each individual project page, view the help wanted issues for that project specifically.
Okay. So there you go. Great. Glad we could answer your question, Mike. There's also upforgrabs.net. Yeah, absolutely. That website sorts and reports these types of things as well.
Yeah, Up4Grabs is another great source that also extends beyond the .NET community.
Sure. All right, I'm going to go back over. So here's my Stream Tools project. This is, right, all of the things that you see here, these widgets like these numbers below me and that rainbow beard gauge there. When we get to 5,000 followers, Dave, and followers are free. It's easy for you to click the follow button up on the top. No, you don't need to use any kind of payment or anything. But when that happens, I'm going to dye this beard rainbow colored. And based on how those numbers are growing, I might have to dye this for either the end of the month or maybe for Valentine's Day. And Mrs. C Sharp Fritz will be thanking you, thanking you, the viewers, the pair programmers, for doing this to me. So let me set up a live share here. I'm going to click the live share button at the top, and it wants me to sign in. I'm going to pull this over here and make sure that I sign in to my account. Yep, and get signed in here. All right. Ready to collaborate, and we'll see this little sharing button's going to say good. It is on my clipboard. I have a link, so I'm going to reach over and share that link privately with Dave so that he can click through and from his Visual Studio join ours. There we go. So live share is it's completely free. It's a free service. None of your code gets stored on Microsoft servers or anything like that. And you get to collaborate with whoever you'd like using any language, because it also works in Visual Studio Code. Really, really cool. Yes, it is amazing, Willie. Think of it like those either Google Docs or Word in Word 365 docs, where you see the little tape flag of the various folks collaborating and navigating around your code. Did I give you the link there, right?
You did, although I'm getting a session not active.
What? Oh, yeah, look at that. The sharing thing went away. It says sharing. Let me recopy the link. Try that again. Yeah, you know what? I put the wrong link in there, it looks like.
Yeah, it's still not.
No? Let me restart it.
Okay, let me try that one.
Okay. Recent demos blew you away. Yeah, there's really neat stuff you can do with this. And it's getting better and better with they call themselves in a public preview. But completely free, and being able to collaborate with folks like that is amazing. I'd love to see the record option to live share so we can save and share with the team later. Right now, we record our screen in Teams, save to the channel, but integration between the two would be amazing. Yes, it's a public preview of live share. Yep.
Oh, there we go. I got it.
You got the sign-in thing?
Yeah, I was adding an extra equal at the end of the URL there. I got it now.
Awesome. We'll see you pop in here in a second. So that ticker up at the top is actually, so it comes out of this Stream Tools project. This is actually an ASP.NET Core application. And there's a view, I believe it, not configuration, contributors information. And here it is. And this just does a couple of loops to output top for the week, top for the month. There we go. There's Dave.
Yep.
And top all time.
There we go.
And that's for each project. For each one of my projects, it just outputs that information. Now, that's not bad. And actually, I thought this was a for loop around this. I only see it once here.
Yep.
Oh no,
in fact, Willie 1977 Games says there's a Visual Studio Code extension for VS Live Share. They're also compatible. I'm actually coming in through Visual Studio Code right now.
Yeah. So real easy to get started and use. And you can even sign in with your GitHub account. You don't have to log in with a Microsoft ID. Sign in with GitHub and you're off and running. So this right now lives under something called GitHub Controller. And if I come down here, there's the contributors information where it goes and gets the recent contributors for whatever that CSV of projects I have is. And that's That's okay for this that's very isolated and fixated on just GitHub. I'd like to convert this and have it do more of a news capability of this. Right, this is... I want to include that Discover .NET information, so I can rename this later and do a little bit of that refactoring. But I'd like to add to the model those news pieces of information. So right now, my model, right, it's getting this recent contributors, which is a array of GitHub information, and it's just outputting an array of those entries from GitHub, right? It goes out and gets that information. Okay, that's fine. And that's interesting. It goes to contributor _ do I remember how to do this properly? Oh, H-scroll. There it is. This is the one I was thinking of. Where it does, yeah, there's a for each repository, and then it just loops through and shows here's what they are. So, and then here's all my JavaScript at the end to set up the marquee, set up the speed, and have it just roll by like it is up there. Yeah, it's a marquee jQuery capability. Neat. Hugo says LiveShare is cross-platform compatible. Remember with Scott Hansen when he was in Code and Mac OS LiveShared with me. We did that also with Julie Lerman at one point. But yeah, you can do all that cool stuff back and forth between any Visual Studio Code. It even works on Linux. So right now, this is returning, the model that is returned here is an IEnumerable of GitHub information. I feel like we're going to need to expand that model a little bit to include some of the information about the projects and headlines that we're going to show here. So what do you think? We can, instead of just an IEnumerable of GitHub information, I feel like maybe there should be like a model called like a news scroller view model or something.
Yeah, so, it's not clickable, right? So we really just need the title of each of the new posts and maybe the source.
Sure.
So we're going to need a few things. So we could either use a model for those, or you could just use a tuple to get a couple things in there. You might want, what about the date? Do you want to put in the published date next to the title?
Nah, let's just put the titles.
Yeah,
Cyberlash,
okay.
Thank you so much for that subscription. Yeah, if we just put the titles and maybe we put some sort of a color hint so that the GitHub stuff stays in yellow up top and we put Discover in the Discover.net's purple so that we kind of call back to that brand.
Yeah, okay. So then if all we're doing is a title, we just need to add, some sort of enumerable of strings in here somewhere that we can pass back to the marquee.
Yeah. So let me think here. If we go back over to the controller, and if we add, I'm just going to add a class to the bottom here. Oh my gosh. Too many methods. Collapse all them up. And I'm going to start Karnak here so you can see my keystrokes. Karnak, yeah. I think that, right? Brendan helped on that one, didn't he? RH Sumner asks, how do you get the marquee to show up on the Twitch stream? Is it just a windowless browser tiled on the desktop? OBS, yes, allows us to embed browser sources. A lot of the stuff that you see here is a browser inside the video. So I'm going to add a view model down here. And I'll call this, ticker view model. And there were two parts. So the first part that it's actually outputting is an IEnumerable of GitHub information. So I'm just going to create a property for that so that I don't have to think too much about this. IEnumerable, no, not all that stuff, of GitHub information. Okay. And I'll control dot, so I get a using statement, and I'll call this GitHub information. And then we just need, you were saying just an array of strings, but I think we also want to put like the source, the news source.
Yeah, and okay, so maybe we do want them off because there was also a suggestion in the chat to eventually add some sort of ID that you could then ask the bot to give you a link.
Oh, that would be neat. Oh, Lennon, that's a neat idea. Okay.
Yeah.
So do you have IDs hooked up to it? Hooked up to, or is it just the
No,
URL?
so there aren't. Yeah, it's just the URL. So the IDs would have to be somehow internal, or maybe a hash of the URL, or just sequential for the day. Yeah. I mean, we'd probably want to figure that out later, but it does suggest that a model is needed.
Yeah. Okay. So if we need to show the source, the source being discover.net, a suggested color, and then that array of 5 blocks of not just blocks of text, but text and link. Yeah, we need a little bit more to that.
Yeah. So maybe if we make a
blog post model. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and then.
So Dave's working on his local machine. We're getting it reflected here on mine, and you're seeing what he's keying in. And
No, we'll keep the link. We'll do.
Sure.
What else do we do here? No, let's just go ahead and we'll keep the. Just in case you ever want to throw this out somewhere. We'll get the publish date and time. It doesn't hurt to pull that down. And you know what? Let's also do. So what I'm doing right now is I'm matching the name of these properties with the JSON items that will come down with the API.
Okay.
That way we can just deserialize that right into an enumerable blog post models.
Okay. And then, so then if we have a source, a color, and then if we associate these with some sort of an ordinal, maybe, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then as suggested, we can update the bot later so that you say ticker 1 and it grabs whatever has the 1 next to it on the ticker and gives you the URL.
Yeah, or this might be a better idea. Just use a bang ticker and then don't even worry about identifying by ID. If anyone wants to see any of the tickers, you just do that and then it just pulls down the same most recent whatevers.
Okay.
That way the ticker and the chatbot can be totally disconnected too.
Okay. S&B, thanks so much for that resub. That was the bazinga that we heard. Ticker sends a whisper with the links. That's not bad either. We'll cross that with the bot in a future discussion here, but let's get this working. So we have the post model. Or even, gosh, if you said bang ticker and you gave it part of the title, it just output the URL.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea too. Yeah. Right.
So if there's ASP.NET 3 released is the thing, and you said bang ticker ASP.NET 3, here's the one of those. Let me output that URL. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not bad. Okay. And Lannon's opening an issue in the repo. Fantastic. I love hearing that. So the other properties that we needed was the source, suggested color, and then this array of the blog post models. So if we make that a tuple or tuple? String source, string color, and then we have an IEnumerable of blog post models called posts. Blog posts. Microsoft Developer, thank you for the follow. I know who owns that over there. Let's see. All right, here. This is the tomato VI Emacs discussion. Look at them here in the chat room. Tuple, tuple. Now, come on, Hugo. Tuple. What is that? And then if we just call this news, we may at some point want to turn this into an IEnumerable of these things if there's multiple news sources. But for right now, discover.net is going to be my exclusive news source. Yeah.
Yeah, I paid a lot for that privilege.
A lot. There were
Yeah.
$1 million deals that went down here,
right.
ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Lannon, for opening the issue. All right, so we have a view model, and we have the model that we're going to embed there for the news. I'm going to scroll back up here to the actual method that outputs it, and I believe here it is, contributors information. Here's where it is getting the recent contributors to build that initial out model.
So
okay.
do you just want to put our stuff here and then refactor it later?
Yeah, let's make it work, refactor it later. So right here on 53, I'm gonna just put a thing here, news posts equals get news from discover.net and generate this method, and then have this return that tuple that we suggested here. Oh no, good. I did a Control-C and I thought it was going to take a powder on me. There we go. All right, so can you help out with here on 63 instead of throwing an exception?
Yeah, so what we're going to need, we're just pulling down a JSON file. So let's create a HTTP client. And we're going to make a single static one because that's that is the modern guidance.
Well, actually,
so let's
right. ASP.
Am I wrong? Am I behind the curve?
Well, actually,
they keep. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, ASP.NET Core will provide us an HTTP client and manage that for us.
Okay. Well, then let's just get that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. I forgot we're inside of a controller here. Yeah. So let's go ahead and just get that. Is there a provider for that, or will it just inject it right into the?
Let me see. Let me stop the follow. So if we go up here, if we just request, I think if we just request an HTTP client, it'll give us one if we don't name it.
Okay.
But we can request a factory, and we can request one by name. So I think we just want to request an iHTTP. Do we request an HTTP factory?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Is there a factory that we need to use, or just give it to us straight up?
I'm forgetting this. It's actually in some of our other, some of the other controllers here, and I'm just gonna doink around. I'm gonna look at one or two of these other ones to see if there is one. No, I don't have one here. Bad Jeff.
Oh, there you go. iHTTP client factory.
Ah, there we go. Thank you, Brave Cobra. I appreciate chiming in with that.
Okay.
Along with the link to the docs.
Yeah, that's one of my pain points in ASP.NET Core is trying to remember which is a factory, which isn't. How do the container is nice, but you got to kind of know what's being put in before you can get it back out.
So while you're doing that, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go over to startup in the startup method, and I'm actually going to put this up as a next to what you're working on. I'm going to reach into this startup and configure when you request that HTTP client, you can actually request it by name.
Yeah. Do you want me to request it by name? Or
why don't you request
a register one?
Yeah, I'll register one. I'll define one with the name discover.net.
Okay.
So there we go. Services at HTTP client. I'm going to create one here on the left while Dave's over here working on the right, and I'll let it follow him.
And we're going to use, you already have, well, JSON.NET comes along with ASP.NET Core right now, right?
Yes, so it should be there.
Because we're lazy and I don't feel like learning another serializer.
Absolutely. I don't blame you on that one. And I'm just going to scroll. Yep. Make sure I get the same name right because we're doing this by name. Discover.net. So now it'll have an HTTP client that's registered and managed specifically for those interactions with Discover. Easy. I could add additional configuration there if I needed it.
Okay, so now we're cooking with gas. Let's go ahead and get our
Willie's right. Because we put the configuration all over there in that services configure, these interactions that Dave's putting together around the Discover.net API, we can add things like poly, so we can do rechecks and timeouts appropriately, and setting up any other headers that we might need, including things like authentication. Set that up all over there so that when we actually need the client, what's provided to us from the factory is already prehydrated with all that stuff. And in this way, I don't need to think about configuring it appropriately for this. All that stuff is centralized and easy for me to change. I don't need to go hunting for it in every block of code. Now I named the HTTP client with a string here. You can actually wrap that with a class if there's other things that you want to standardize for your interactions. And I've done something like that with the GitHub repository that I have here in this project. So let's see. So you're setting up a using statement for a stream response to go get that data from Discover.net news JSON. So that's just news data, huh?
Yep, that is our endpoint from Discover.net, and it's already essentially what you see on the homepage, date-ordered list of recent news. So that's exactly what we want for the ticker here.
Awesome. And Willie, you're right. You avoid that whole HTTP client smell by using, if you were to use a strongly typed class, wrapping your client. So then, instead of having to write all this code everywhere that I want to use that client, I could have a class that's just called Discover.net repository that has get latest news, and this is there inside that class, and all that is managed using dependency injection, and all the state is managed by ASP.NET Core for us, and it avoids that smell, especially if you're doing microservices. Great technique to centralize this type of logic. But we're only doing this in one place for this project. So not that big a deal to put it here in one place. Serialize or deserialize the blog post model. Nice.
Okay, so...
Yeah, what's your purple hash?
Color, yeah. Okay. How many do we want? Maybe 4? We probably don't want to overload it.
I was going to say 4 or 5. What do you think, chat room? 4 or 5? It's going to be up to the folks in the chat room. You're the ones who are going to be seeing it. Scroll across the top.
5.
First one said 5. Hugo likes 5. Oh, look at all the 5s coming out now. Can I get one more 5 to make it 5 5s? Brave Cobra suggests 51A8 Baker for the purple. All right, I'll copy that in from Brave Cobra. Thank you so much, sir.
Yep, and there's a subtle trade-off here. I am materializing my link statement so that we're creating some memory, but we don't have to reiterate the original set of posts. Alternatively, you could just do this, since we're passing around an IEnumerable. That won't allocate a new list, but it means that we have to run the logic and take every time we end up getting our list of posts. So, it's that performance versus allocation trade-off that's been so popular in that land recently. I'm going to go ahead and take the allocation hit, so we don't have to rerun link every time.
Sure. And why not make it an array instead of a list so that we get a little bit smaller object and we're not modifying it?
Yeah.
So cool.
Very good idea. Okay.
So now that'll return scrolling up.
That's it.
That's an easy interaction just to get news. All right. And this is kind of that microservice interaction that folks expect. Pulling it from that JSON location. And if I control click this, it opened in a browser over here. Let me bring this over. Right. So .NET blog, Alvin Ashcraft's Morning Dew, but the Google Plus shutdown, Dewdrop, FBNet external engine, data modeling with indexes from Ienda. Nice. All right. So that'll return into this news posts. So we need to munge them together so we have that view model that we're going to be returning. So I'm going to throw up here right after news posts. Let's call this out view model. And what did we call the view model? It was a thing down here, wasn't it? Ticker view model. And GitHub information equals out model. And we'll refactor later. Just get it working. News equals news posts. So then instead of returning this, we will return... Oh, we need to await this. I'm terrible around async and await, Dave. Just awful. It's one of those things. I've spent time learning it, but I'm still...
I'm pretty sure there's like a handful of people who really know what they're doing, and the rest of us are all just hacking through until it actually compiles.
Brave Cobra looks like has a better color code there. I'll grab that one. All right. Is the order of posts from the remote API guaranteed?
For this endpoint, yes. This
okay.
one will do most recent first. So we can take advantage of that, and that's why we only have to do a take, and we don't have to order the list after pulling it down.
Fantastic. All right. So let me save that over here. I'm going to go back to the view. I'm going to swap out the model now with our new ticker view model object. Can't find it. Why can't you find it? Ticker view model is in... Let me get the namespace right. I put it here. Uh-oh. All right. So if I put that there, now it found it. So instead of for each repo in the model, it's going to be in model.github information. So there's the GitHub information outputting. Cool. So then the next bit after that for each, right? So repository, top week, top month, top all time. That's that span, right? And then let me just make sure. So on updated repository, whatever, reload, and then it's grabbing that information. May need to fix a little bit of code there. Oh, no. You know what? That's just reloading those repositories. All right. So we'll be okay with this. I think we can do this. So then if we have another span and ID equals news, and then put a nice bold item here, and we put latest news from, and then it's going to be right model dot news dot source. Richard Thor, thanks so much for the follow. I appreciate you joining us. And I can put the color here, right? Style equals color, and then just output, right? Model news. Cool. That's easy. Now, this is a span with a HTML partial sync for the contributor ticker segment. What's that one look like? So it's just a for each with a span. That's easy. I'm going to copy that. So then we just do a for each here, right? Ah! What happened? I tabbed and for each. Yeah, wow. That's not right. Oh my gosh. Stop showing off your swag. Hang on, let's fix that. That's not gonna... No, it's for each all next to each other, right? Right, yeah. Var article in model dot news dot blog posts. And then we just do a span for each one of those, right? Article dot title. That's it. I just need to check to make sure that it formats properly. So marquee star sets that. If it's underlined in bold, no, we're good. I think we're good. Autocomplete fail. Yeah, I agree, Cyralash. Yeah. And what extension is that? Which extension? Yeah, yeah. For the JSON viewing. Oh, the JSON viewing that I was doing in Firefox was it's where's my extensions? Add-ons. No, I don't see it here. I thought I had like a pretty print here for that. But no. Yeah, I thought I had like a pretty print, but I'm using Firefox for that. Yeah. All right, so I think that's everything for this, and it should now get that data and present it, right? So let's give it a shot.
Let's see. Fingers
Does
crossed.
it work?
It always works the first time, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Always.
And then I'll, when it does, then we'll compile, deploy, and then we'll have it appear up top all the time. So loading, compiling. Come on. Build succeeded. Ship it. Maybe. Yeah, I didn't know that they included it. I know I had a pretty printer with Chrome installed. Marcelo Barros, thanks so much for the follow. I appreciate you joining us. There we go. So this is the front door to this, and there's GitHub information. So we'll have to change this up. If I click through to that, there's the ticker. So here comes, okay, stream tools, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to hit
Here
F12.
It comes.
Is it there?
This is so exciting.
There's the marquee, div class. All right, so there's two of them that it puts in there. News, there it is. Latest news from discover.net.
Latest news.
There it is.
Hey, cool.
Awesome. It's not the right color. I think we're missing an important there. Right? Maybe we need that.
Oh, yeah, and you probably want some kind of delimiter.
Oh, yeah, look at that. They're right up against each other. But we've got it.
Yeah, works. Now it's just fine-tuning.
Yeah. Wadsy, thanks for that subscription with your Twitch Prime. I appreciate you joining us. And we'll make a matching donation to Girl Develop It. So let's go back over. Since that's all in Razor, we can modify it on the fly here, right? So which how is it separating it for the live one? Right?
Looks like you've just got a little more margin.
Or it's inside of another span. Yeah. But we do have one here. So, all right, let me do this. Let's put the bang important here. And maybe we just put style equals margin right. 3 pixels. 3. 3's good. refresh. Come on. Do it. There's padding in the marquee. Sure, there's padding in the marquee, but between the elements of it, right? So between Bardaki there on Stream Tools, there's some happening there. So top all time. Yeah. There we go. Purple's hard to read.
Ooh.
There was a lighter purple that Brave Cobra had suggested.
Yeah, and that padding still isn't, that margin still isn't quite doing it.
No. It doesn't feel like they're separate articles.
Yeah, maybe even like put a pipe in between them or something.
What if we underlined each one? So then you could see where the underline stops.
Oh, that could work.
What is it? Text? Is it text decoration? Is that the one I'm thinking of? And yeah, underline.
Yeah.
And that, yeah, the color doesn't work with my gray background. Purple underline, all things purple. Hey, take it easy there. Let me see. Brave Cobra had a suggestion for another color. Try 551A8B. I'm actually going to hard code that color here instead of taking the model color, just for right now to get it to show. And then we can have it pull from server side in a minute. Come on. Look at this. 5 minutes to go. We're going to hit the post, Dave. We're going to stop right on time. I never do that.
Look at that.
All right. Here we go. Top all time. Yeah. Show me it. That's better.
I might have, let me look.
There's the Google shutdown, and then a space, and then the dewdrop. Padding right.
Yeah, that's better. Yeah, the underline works better.
Yeah. Terrific. All right, I'm going to move that. I'm going to move that color here back into the controller, and then I think we're in a great place to make a commit and call it a day. Fantastic. For long titles, should the title be truncated for max characters? Nah, it's fine. It's fine for right now. All right, I'm going to hit caps lock so I can get into Git here. Stream tools. So we modified a couple files here. I will run a commit. What's your GitHub ID?
Mine?
Yep. So I can get the co-author in there.
Okay. Dave A. Glick.
Right, and I'm make sure I put the co-author. What? Oh shoot! What's the co-author? Commit together with co-authors. There we go. Co-authored by. You know what? I'm not even gonna let it force me. Yeah, I know. Right, if I do git add, git commit, and it shouldn't it prompt me for an editor? There we go. All right. So added news sources to the ticker. Added news from discover.net to the ticker. And then, let me make sure I get this right. Co-authored by Dave Glick. And it is, oh shoot, it wants the email that you go by out there.
Oh, that's fine. Email's public. Dave@daveaglick.com.
There we go.
You're missing an E before the at.
There we go. And then it's going to prompt me to sign. Cool. Push that. Call it a day. Fantastic.
Boom.
All right.
30 seconds left.
Oh, right on time. I'll actually kick off a build, and I will call this 170. Fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us, Dave. This was cool. This really, we learned a lot about Discover.net. We learned about the .NET community and some of those things that are important for us as open source contributors. I really appreciated your insight into some of those things about keeping open source folks, active and engaged. And funding is certainly a big challenge out there. And I love that we've now got Discover news articles that are going to appear here on the stream. This is great.
Yeah, super cool. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Not a problem. And we'll put a link to Discover.net over there with this video when we archive it over to YouTube a little bit later today. But I'm going to set up to raid the Visual Studio channel because they're going to be hosting I believe it's the .NET Mobile Developers stand-up that they're setting up. So for all of our friends that are there in the chat room, if you want to watch and learn all that's going on from our friend James Montemagno and the new things that are happening around .NET for the mobile space, you don't have to do a thing. You can sit right back, and we're going to head over there and say hello to our friends. Take your .NET bot emotes with you. Let them know that you were over here and that you had a good time, and they'll be happy to see you. You don't have to do a thing. You'll be transferred right over there. Twitch will take care of all the stuff on the backside for you. Dave, thanks so much for joining us. And next week...
My pleasure.
Awesome. Next week, our guest will be Julie Lerman, and we're going to talk about Cosmos DB and serverless computing. Tomorrow, I'll be back working on our Stream Deck and building an add-on for the Stream Deck. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining us. And say hi to the Visual Studio, folks. Take care. And sending everybody over now. There we go.